Hi everybody. Well, it's Sunday, so this video will be short and hopefully the last video on Harold's book for a few days, at least for a day or two, because I'm sure that once the book hits the shelves, there is going to be so much more. So I, for one, will at least need one day away from it, unless I'm intent on going completely insane. But for now, let's quickly talk about Harold's recollection about Mog's miscarriage. Now, I don't want to call them liars on this particular subject because it goes beyond my comprehension that someone will lie about something like this. But how can we believe and sympathize when this story is littered with discrepancies and inaccuracies? So, Harold writes that they left the hospital with their unborn child in a tiny package and then went to a place only they knew, where he dug a hole with his hands under a banyan tree and placed the tiny package in the soft ground. Now let's look into this in detail. According to Mog and Harold, the miscarriage happened in July 2020. In Megan's own words, it happened on the first morning in their new home. So I'm going to venture a guess and say it happened in early July, as I have it on good authority that their first day in their Montecito home was the 9th of July. I have a backstory relating to that date, but it is of lesser interest as it involves the basics like furniture and a few things needing fixing, the usual thing when one moves home. And according to my source, there was a time when Mog spent some time elsewhere while things were being done. There were also arguments, after which one of them would leave. Megan spending a few days at San Ysidro Ranch and so on. We actually talked about that in older videos, but officially their first day in their Montecito home was the 9th of July. So, according to Mog, if the incident happened on their first morning, then it happened on the morning of the 10th of July. So, why is this important at all? Well, round about the 24th of June, we saw Harold and Mog at Homeboy Industries helping to pack food. Now, I watched the short video, and if Mog was pregnant, then she could not have been more than a few weeks. Now, I know states and countries differ in legislation, but as a rule of thumb, in the United States, a miscarriage is defined as the loss of a baby before the 20th week of pregnancy, and a stillbirth, the loss of a baby after 20 weeks. In England and South Africa, it is 24 weeks. What happens to the remains of a miscarriage is not something I think would be suitable to go into a YouTube channel. But suffice it to say, it depends on how far along the pregnancy was and what procedures were applied after a miscarriage. In an early miscarriage, there are procedures to remove remains, and more often than not, very little remains are discernible from, let's call it, everything else. A hospital will safely, through cremation or incineration, dispose of the remains, all of it. In some cases, the couple may request a series of tests to try and determine the cause of the miscarriage. After 20 weeks, however, there are other options. The fetus, or then the baby, will be removed, and most hospitals will provide or offer cremation services, or if it is the couple's choice, release the body to a funeral home of the parent's choice. In most developed countries, that is how it is done. No way, unless you live in an underdeveloped country, does a hospital wrap the remains in a parcel and hand it to you to walk out with. Even under usual and normal circumstances, remains are cleaned and sterilized. And remember, in July 2020, the entire world was also in the middle of a pandemic. I'm pretty sure that whatever hospital it was that allegedly rendered services to Mog would have contravened a number of laws and rules if Harry's recollections are actually true. Okay, so let's thankfully leave the more sensitive part of the narrative. I looked it up, and the banyan tree is not indigenous to the United States and can only be found in Florida, not California. And then Harold recalls that he dug a hole with his hand. In other words, Magic Harold dug into the tree roots with his hands. So, how deep do you think he actually dug? 10, 20 centimeters? Well, perhaps someone should have advised Harold that by saying this, he is admitting to breaking the law, because in California it is illegal to bury human remains anywhere but in a registered, designated burial ground, like, for instance, a cemetery. So, my friends, I am afraid that there are just too many discrepancies in the story to prove it to be true. First and foremost, because if true, laws of the state of California were broken at least twice. Once, when it could cause serious repercussions for a hospital, and secondly, a significant fine for Harold. And then, of course, Mog's story, written for the New York Times, and Abigail Spencer's story in the Netflix series does not exactly match either. So, as much as I hate doing this, I'm afraid I'm pretty much convinced now that the entire story about a miscarriage is an absolute fantasy and a figment of Harold and Mog's fertile imagination. Okay, my dear, so I'll see you soon. Until then, please take good care of yourself. Bye.